he knew what the standard was. The expectations were clear. He was given some opportunity, but if he didn't grab it, it wouldn't have been continued to given to him.
Luds, do you want to start us off since we have to squint to hear you anyway? Why don't you give Neil the first question of this one?
Oh, it's an easy one for Neil. I just, you only got how many guys you got there? 10, 11, 12? I'm just curious. What are you doing with those guys? To get them wherever you want to get them before the other guys come back. The second part of that would be when the others, the good players that are Olympians now, are those guys going to practice at all or morning skate, or do they step right in the lineup? Two-parter.
You know what? We actually have a decent chunk right now. They're 16. So you can run a decent practice with those numbers and, whatever the exact numbers are, 10, 5, and 1. You adjust your drills a little bit. You adjust the length of a drill, how it runs, and, potentially even the length of practice. But, so far, the 3 practices we've had back have been productive. The guys have moved well. There's a little rust in the first day, but other than that, I've been impressed with the tempo and, frankly, even the competitive side, knowing we don't have a game for a few days. We don't want to waste this time, and our guys have done a good job that way. So in terms of the guys coming back from Italy, it'll be dependent on, when they arrive, where they're at, bumps and bruises wise. But if we could get a practice, that'd be great. If not, morning skate, get them caught up to speed, and let's just play.
I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about Olympics. We only have a half hour with you, so I want to go way back to summer. I think you were in the process of interviewing for a head coaching job. You're interviewing. I'd love to hear that whole process. When did you first hear about the opportunity? How did it transition to what it became now, and how did that whole process go for you?
Yeah, obviously, the day there was a change in the coaching staff with Dlls, I think we had a playoff game in Texas that same day, and I wasn't reaching out, and they weren't going to bother me in our process and our quest to go after a Calder Cup either. So I think we spoke potentially even after that game, and it was great. Both Jim and Scott White said, "Hey, you're going to be interviewed, but let's focus on what you need to do." And frankly, I wouldn't want it any other way. So we, knowing that opportunity was going to happen, I just wanted to focus on Texas, and we were in the 3rd round of playoffs. We were trying to advance to the Calder Cup finals, and it was nice just focusing on our team, our group, and then also not having to do an interview in between games or something of that nature. So I appreciate how the process went in terms of when the season ended. I had a handful of days, maybe 2 or 3 days to collect my stuff. I went through a full formal process, even though I've been with the team for as long as I have, and I appreciate that process. I'd rather go through it and, show, your stuff behind the scenes, because everyone knows each other as a human, but, you don't always see the inner workings on a day-to-day basis. So I enjoyed going through that process. It was excellent. Professional, as you can imagine, when Jim is running or conducting anything. And at the end of the day, it's all worked out great for everyone.
I don't know how much you want to pull back the curtain, but can you give us any insight as to what your sales pitch is in an NHL head coaching interview like that?
No, fortunately, I went really far with another organization the summer prior. You lean on those experiences, whether it's the initial interview, the in-person interview. In Dallas, I fortunately skipped a step because of my tenure with the team, so I went right into the in-person with our organization, which made sense. But using the other opportunity the year prior, you look at it, you see what you liked about it, maybe some things you want to adjust. But, the one thing I've always really tried to rely on is authenticity. And, if you're their guy, you're their guy, and you be authentic to your own process. And at the end of the day, you go through it. And as long as you felt like you did your part and you were authentic to yourself, it'll work out the way it should. And sometimes that means you don't get it, but it still works out the way it should.
So the previous one, the year before, was there anything that you look back on, and then for this past summer, that you would have done differently, or did you learn something that really helped you with the Stars?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say different. I was probably a little more efficient in my preparation, and knowing the process I did the summer prior, going through my plan, the way I was organizing things. I think it was just a little more streamlined, and I was probably a little more purposeful in my planning portion of that. And then frankly, then you just execute and you do your thing. And like I said, when you're interviewing for a job at that level of hockey, every candidate's qualified. Every candidate is detailed. Everyone's going to do a good job, and it truly should work out the way it does. And, the job I didn't get the summer prior, that all worked out. This job all worked out. So I think sometimes, you go into one of those moments and everyone's trying to put their best foot forward. And as long as you do, you got to trust the process that it'll all kind of find its way.
You look back 10 years, obviously it gets even more when you go further. Power plays are now hitting in 30s where they used to be. A great power play was in the 20s. Is there anything you can put your finger on at the NHL level of why they're just getting better and better and better?
Well, I wouldn't say 30 is a common.
Right.
I'd say your mid 20s. Like if you're 23, 24, 25, you're going to close to that top 10, right? I think it's just the skill level of these players. And, when you look at it even a handful of years ago, you have one or two guys of that kind of talent on a unit potentially. You get a third guy with that kind of talent, maybe it gets going. But, you look at us, you probably have, 6 or 7 players with that ability. And the bigger challenge is, some guys have to go to a second unit. And that's more of a challenge as opposed to the sheer talent that, players have nowadays. And then that's the fun part is, testing boundaries. There's nothing really that we probably couldn't attempt based on skill level, and that's across the league. And it's more about risk reward and the risk. We obviously think of maybe a shorthanded chance. The risk is also frustration, changing momentum, forcing. But is the reward potentially in the back of the net? And so I think that's when you're looking into a pre-scout or you're looking into how we might want to change shapes against a particular kill. What's the risk reward in terms of, is this going to work and how will it kind of snowball the rest of our momentum?
I want to talk about a little bit of the middle of the lineup. You had Ritzy Ritz back in Texas. What do you see from his game? And, we obviously like him a lot, and I'm sure you guys too. What do you feel his ceiling is?
You know what? Ritzy's a guy from a coaching perspective. He lets you sleep at night. The more Ritzovians you have in the lineup, the better you feel when they're over the boards. And he plays the game the right way, and he essentially plays the game we were all taught as kids, right? When you're learning how the sport's supposed to be played on paper. And what stands out for me is his hockey IQ. He reads it at an elite level. And even as a rookie in the NHL, he sees the structural side of the game better than most. I think you pair that with obviously the jam and the tenacity you guys see on a nightly basis. And what I like, it's truly authentic. And he played like that game in, game out for Texas last season. We went to the third round of the playoffs, as you guys know. And, obviously we had some really good veterans on our team. But, at the end of the day, it was a rookie, that was our dog. Like in the, he's coming by, he's getting the bench going. His habits, his energy, it was relentless. And, we had a handful of those guys, so not to discredit them, but he was our driver. And obviously he was rookie of the year in the American Hockey League. And so I'm not shocked at his success. In terms of his ceiling, you see him complimenting a second line right now, right? And if not our first line, you could switch those orders around on the whiteboard and you could put him either way. And he doesn't look out of place. And I think what's happened is you've seen some other guys slot in other areas that have brought us success. And, one guy doesn't adjust to that new environment, it probably doesn't work. But, Ritzy's done a good job. And, it takes a minute to all of a sudden now you have Mikko Rantanen on your wing and you're like, I better make sure this pass is perfect and this. And, he had to figure out quick, just be a hockey player. Passing to Mikko is no different than passing to Oscar, just execute. But not everyone can do that. And the fact that the moment hasn't been too big for him, that really matters. So, you look at Dlls, a top team in the NHL. Obviously we want to go on a deep run. We all know what our goal and expectations are. The moment never seems to be too big for him. And you can't get enough players like that. So for me, the ceiling is high.
He referenced, I think on our show, we had him on our show. And then anytime I talk to him, he talks about your relationship and how much he still uses you and uses you as a sounding board, and you guys have a great relationship. I'd love to hear you describe your relationship with your players down in Texas and how you then utilize now up here with a bunch of the guys that are on the roster that you've already coached.
Well, you know what? I'd say it's a two-way street. And I think, first and foremost, when I got here this year, knowing I already had 9 players that I'd coached as their head coach, that was a nice environment for myself to walk in. It doesn't mean it was always rainbows and sunshines, but there's a relationship, and a working relationship and a personal relationship. And I think Ritzy, we were together not only for a whole year last year. When he first came out of college, we were able to get him, it might have been maybe 10 regular season games and then 2 rounds into the playoffs. And that was a bit of a cheat sheet. That got him kickstarted into a real good rookie season. So for me, I've really enjoyed an opportunity to work with a player like that. You look at Maverick Bourque, obviously another player I'm very close with. Seeing them now live out their childhood dream and also executing and getting better and developing, that's important. And I think that's something that, can be a little lost at times at this level in particular is, you still want guys to develop at this level as we're trying to push forward. And you're seeing that. And I give Glenn and Naz and, the Pellets, our whole staff, a ton of credit for, recognizing that. And even in decision-making late in games, special teams, you're seeing guys grab a little bit more of the pie. And, that can be good. And big picture, a guy's out for a day, someone needs to grab a role or grab extra minutes. They've done it before. And frankly, that's where confidence comes from. It's, you've either done it before, or you've put in the work to prepare for it. And, he's a player that's done both.
Boy, you segued right into my next question, which is Maverick Bourque. You've seen him up close and personal in the AHL, struggle with that level, figure it out, bet on himself, come back and MVP.
Yep.
Have a phenomenal year, earn his NHL spot, struggle, fight, and now he's starting to, as you said, be in that top 6, whether you want to call it the first or second line. And even from the beginning of this year to now, he looks different, let alone from last year to this year. And of course, getting hurt in training camp last year or preseason did not help his cause as a rookie in the NHL. But what are you seeing? And is there any doubt in your mind that he continues to grow, because he has an incredibly high standard for himself? He expects to be not just a player, but an offensive contributor on this team.
Yeah, that's what he's done his whole life. So it's good. I don't want that mindset to change. And you know what? It's funny. Like everyone, and I get it, from a fan perspective, and you see these first rounders that we draft and there's instant excitement and some noise around them. And that's good. It's positive. It's what should be. But a little bit of struggles and some failures good. And, the fact that Bourque, and we laugh, right? His first year struggles were still 20 goals and 55 points in the American Hockey League on a first place team. So it wasn't like he was given
very good team.
Yeah, he wasn't given everything that first year. And believe it or not, and it was tough for him because you're coming in from the Quebec League where he had essentially dominated since his inception. He had to earn it. And, it wasn't always easy. And, we had some tough meetings. We had some tough days. But I give him full credit because it made our relationship stronger. And he's the one who did it. And then the next year he came back more driven, and he wasn't going to allow himself to be, pushed to a second PP or pushed to a third line or pushed, so he knew what the standard was. The expectations were clear. He was given some opportunity, but if he didn't grab it, it wouldn't have been continued to given to him. And there was no chance, he wasn't going to take it. And what he did that second year in Texas, I haven't seen in 6 years there. That was the most dominant game 1 to game 72 by a particular player. And him and Stank did a lot together. But when Stank left and he continued the same pace, drove us into playoffs, carried us in playoffs, and we weren't as deep of a team that year. It was very impressive. And I think that's what I admired the most is, he's not going to take no for an answer, and he doesn't expect the results to be instant. If it has to mean you have to work harder, put in more work, practice, he'll do it. And you're seeing some progression from last season. And I think we're just scratching the surface, and he's going to continue to grow as a professional.
It's funny. It felt like fans maybe had more patience until Wyatt Johnston ruined it for everyone. Overachieving. Now they're like, hey, come in, be an immediate superstar.
Yeah, you know what? And Wyatt's a special player. Yeah. And you're not wrong. And, you'll start to, well, geez, we draft this kid. He's going to be on the team next year. And it doesn't always work that way. We had Thomas Harley was with us for parts of 3 years.
It was great.
Leon, parts of 2 years. That's how it happens. Robo was 1 full year, but, then there was a COVID year. There was, taxi squads, and it's just how it happens. So, you know, what Wyatt was able to do at such a young age, it's very special, and it's not quite the norm. But, you know, again, for Bourque in particular, you know, an extra year, you know, he forced the issue, and you got to give him full marks for what he was able to accomplish.
All right, Luds, we have a million more things we could ask, but we're running out of time. So we're going to let you ask Grammer the last question of the show for him.
No
pressure.
Let me narrow it down from my 10 that I have left. So first off, Neil, thanks for coming in and putting up with those two guys. What do you got? You guys got 25 games to go. What do you got? What boxes are you looking to check before you hit playoffs?
You know what? And obviously, I'm sure you guys have talked about it. There's been a lot of change this year, right? You know, whether it's coaching or, you know, some systems, and, you know, there's a lot of new that surrounded our team. And I think what you've seen is there's been some good challenges, and we've persevered, and we found ways to get better. And even through some struggles, it yielded growth at the end of the day. In the final 25, I want to see, you know, you heard Gully talk about that 1%. Now is the time for that. We're not learning anything new. We're not having new voices. Like, we know who each other are. We've built, you know, we've built our foundation. I think our identity is clear. And I think at the end of the day now, it's the intangibles, how we compete on a nightly basis, how we reload, how we check. And, you know, one thing I've always said is we should look the same without the puck. And that references the way we back check, the way we forward check, the way we work as five. That's what I want to see during these final 25. Different individual attributes will always shine through with the puck. But the way we work and look without the puck is something I want to continue to see dial in over the last 25.
You're speaking his language. I can
Yeah,
see
for
him
sure.
shaking his head, because we've talked a lot about that.